What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the PFN podcast. Ian Cummings here with my fellow NFL draft analyst, A.J. Schulte. NFL Combine was this past week. I apologize. We weren't able to logistically make podcasts from the event happen, but we are here on Monday, a day early, to recap the entire thing for you. 4 days of testing action, tons of positional workouts, tons of risers, and really, really eye-popping testing numbers. A lot of good positional drill work as well. We will get to all of it in due time. But first off, A.J., you were watching the event remotely. How are you doing? How are you managing this weekend? And what's new with you?
Yeah, it was kind of a same old for me with watching the combine remotely, but it was great. I was actually able to get my mom to watch a couple of the drills,
Oh, for real?
which was fun. Yeah, she was like, I don't know what's going on, but he looks pretty good at it. She saw Quinyon Mitchell run the 40. She's like, dang, that boy's fast. Like just so I'm slowly but surely making my mom into an anonymous NFL scout.
That's good. There was to use scouting lingo. There was residual growth there. Yeah.
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 Oh, yeah, definitely.
Right.
She's picking it up.
That's good.
We're gonna eventually get her there.
Yeah.
But it was great to see. I love the NFL Network crew.
Mm-hmm.
Rich Eisen and Daniel Jeremiah are tremendous. I do still miss Mayock on those, oddly enough, but they do such tremendous work every year. Props to them for having to sit there throughout that whole thing and fill up hours and hours of just talking.
Yeah.
Which is it's great for us because we sit here and it's just like you soak it in and you listen to these guys. It's just guys talking ball for 4 or 5 hours. And I thought also this year Stacey Dales was tremendous.
Yes.
As a sideline reporter, she was awesome. Just so much full of anecdotes and always like right there with the interviews and things like that. She was awesome. She absolutely killed it this year.
Yeah,
great broadcast this year.
The NFL Network crew was incredible. Daniel Jeremiah, Rich Eisen, you mentioned Stacey Dales too, all of that. And Chris Mortensen recently passed away, so our condolences for him. Yeah, legend in the business, and you could tell that Daniel Jeremiah was, it was an emotional development for sure. But it was, touching the tribute they did to him. And they do phenomenal work every year. And being at the Combine, this is my first time going in person. So it really stood out to me the endurance that you need to cover it at all levels, right, man? I mean, interviews there, like you have to go right to the front. You gotta be authoritative, right? We're using that scouting lingo again, but man, it's a madhouse. And then during the event too, the endurance to talk football for hours on end. We only do 45 minutes here. Usually we need some self-discipline to keep it to that level, but 5 hours is something different. So props to those guys, props to them for the coverage. Let's get into the Combine. A lot to cover across the positional frameworks. I know quarterbacks, running backs, receivers. The receiver class is stacked, man. Offensive tackle is stacked. Where do you want to start? I'm feeling we start with wide receiver and offensive line because there were a lot of great testers.
We could start there, or we could go in like day by day. Let's do wide receiver and O line first because what a day! what a freaking day for those guys. It feels like every single time somebody went up, like a record was broken. It was crazy.
Yeah, it was insane, man. And we got to start with Xavier Worthy. Run that 4.21. Did you have I had a nagging feeling that maybe it would happen, but I wasn't. His speed is different on tape, right? Like it's different. You have guys who are elite speed threats, and then you have guys who are different. I feel like Jameson Williams at Alabama, his speed was different. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see him run. So that's some history that could have been made that wasn't. But Xavier Worthy's to me was different, right? So I didn't come out and say that maybe it was going to happen because it's tough to predict something like that, right? And a guy can be fast but run like a high 4.2. That's still not a knock to him. Like that's crazy fast. But breaking the record is that's a new level. But I had a nagging feeling that maybe he would get close, right? And then that unofficial 4.22 comes in. You're like, is it going to go to a 4.21?
Yeah, he got it. He got it. They were sitting there the whole time going, I had timed his second time. Like at home, I personally timed it because I was like, I got to see this as soon as it happens, which I don't normally do. I'm not that much of a sicko to sit here and time everybody hand. But that one I did, and I got a 4.21. And I was as soon as it happened, I was like, "Oh man, he's got it." And I think he knew as soon as he because he did the whole track. I think everybody in that building knew he broke that record. And then he immediately shouts out to his mom. It was great. But man, what a historic event, right? It's not every day you see the fastest 40 time ever.
No.
And we could sit here and play, oh, Dion might have said it, James Williams might have said it. Doesn't matter. Xavier Worthy at the end of the day has it. And I mean, it backs up what's on film. Like you said, he's just totally different as a speedster. I mean, just unbelievable. He's got the ball, and then you blink, he's 30 yards down the field, and unbelievable. I mean, imagine being able to go 40 yards in basically 4 seconds.
Yeah.
Like it's unreal to me. And he erased any sort of possible concerns that it was just like, and like, oh well, he's fast, but he plays in the Big 12. He's this and that. No, he's legit NFL fast, and this guy is a stud.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like, he knows how to use it too. That's the thing for me. Like, why I'm so much more
Yeah,
confident. He knows how to use it as a route runner, and I feel like people, because he's so fast, we're getting that effect again. Where, hey, guys, I get it. The speed is legendary. He broke a record for sure, but let's not use that to gloss over the route running ability that's there too, because he's
yeah,
just as good there. So he's
yeah.
a very fun
Right.
player. He might be a top 5 receiver for me, but that's the tough part with this class, man. And let's get into the whole wide receiver group,
Oh
because
my gosh.
this was the fastest wide receiver group on record at the NFL Combine. I believe the average was the highest that we've seen. So many guys ran fast. I mean, Xavier Worthy's speed is different, like we said, but guys like
Yeah,
A.D. Mitchell ran a 4.35. Brian Thomas Jr.
yeah.
ran a
Brian Thomas.
4.33.
Yeah,
Lad McConkey ran a 4.38, I believe. Ricky Pearsall was up there. I mean, there was
yeah,
so much speed in this group. How do you separate these guys? Because it's such a talent
yeah.
dense group at
It
the top. It's incredible.
it really is. When I was sitting here watching the wide receiver drills going through, and I kept writing down name after name after name of guys that you just saw it on film. They were just different athletes. This might be the best collective group of athletes we've had hit the wide receiver in a long time.
Hmm.
Um, just I mean, even some of the smaller names like Anthony Gould came
Yeah.
in, ran a 4.3. Jaquan Jackson ran a 4.42. Bub Means hit a 4.43. Like these are guys who are going day 3 who are sitting here running faster than the average wide receiver times. And it felt like every single time somebody went up. I mean, we probably had what, 20 guys come in sub 4.5,
Hmm. I believe so. Yeah,
something
I'm trying to find the
something
full
close to
list, but
that.
yeah, it was across
Um,
the board. It was very fast.
yeah, and even some of the guys that you weren't expecting to run fast, like I didn't think Brendan Rice would hit a 4.5 flat. Right, I thought he would be closer to 4.6. He comes in and hit a 4.5 flat.
Hmm.
Just things like that. You're just like, oh crap, okay,
Hmm.
like this is different. Like it was just eh, eh, what a day
Yeah,
for these guys. Like, I feel like every evaluator was in there going, uh, and you can look at it long term as how does this affect the free agency market,
yeah.
right? And we already saw, Mike Evans signed a big deal today, but Mike, I mean, like that's a future Hall of Famer.
Hmm.
That was going to happen anyways. But like, how does this impact like that second and third wave of free agency where it's like, oh well, we could sign you to a decent cap deal, or we could just take this guy in round 2 and just say, sorry, bud,
Hmm.
like you're not getting your payday. I think there's so many talented receivers. So you could just go down a list. This will probably be the record for the most NFL draft picks at wide receiver.
Yeah, I could
Just
definitely see
what a
that.
class!
Yeah,
What a class!
it's incredible. It really is. Going down the list a little bit, because we got definitely Worthy, Thomas Mitchell at the top. Devontae Walker ran 4.36. Jacob Cowing 4.38. Roman Wilson 4.39. Roman Wilson's speed is incredible too. You got Gould, like you said, at 4.39. Xavier Legette 4.39, and he's 221 pounds. So that's a different 4.39 right there for sure.
Yeah,
You got Troy Franklin 4.41. You got Bub Means, like you said, Ladarick Griffin from Mississippi State with a 4.43. Cornelius Johnson 4.44. Ryan Flournoy from Southeast Missouri State had a pretty good Senior Bowl showing. He
yeah,
came in with a 4.44.
yeah. That 4.44 for Cornelius Johnson
Yeah.
was very surprising to me. Because I just did not see that kind of athlete at Michigan, and then he goes into the Shrine and the Combine and completely just breaks every sort of thing that I saw on film. So I kind of wonder if it might have been more like a Michigan, just the way they were using him, kind of versus like no, he's like an actual
Yeah.
legit athlete and not just like a stereotypical X, because I was like, this guy just looks like an average. Like, okay, he's going to go day 3 X receiver. You see those guys every year, and then he comes in and just outperforms every sort of expectations I had for him pre-Shrine, at the Shrine Bowl, and at the Combine. So I think that's an interesting profile as well, especially because coming from Michigan,
Mhm.
it's been an NFL pipeline recently for wide receivers.
Yeah.
Um, so I think he might have definitely boosted his stock a lot out of this group.
Yeah, for sure. And I think going back to 2022, like Ohio State, those vertical shots, right? Like the size speed profile was definitely there, but I agree. I think the usage might have diluted it at times. And that's another conversation to have because AD Mitchell ran a 4.35 and he was documented in interviews this week saying, like, yeah, a lot of routes at Texas, I ran at 70%, right? Because if you know you're not getting the ball, conserving your energy for those opportunities where you might be considered, right? That plays into it too. Ricky Pearsall was a guy who I thought on tape was a good athlete, but I don't know. I didn't see a 4.41. I didn't see a 42-inch vertical, right? And he comes out
Yeah,
with those
yeah, that
elite
was
numbers. So it's like
yeah,
the testing doesn't always translate one-to-one to the film. And that's where we come back to that cross-checking method, right? We talked about it before the combine. The combine is a cross-checking event, right? It's not something to
yeah,
reinvent your perspective of prospects. Usually there aren't going to be too many surprises if you watch the film, right? But when there are surprises, there are guys that don't match up 100% with your perception. It's up to you to discern, okay, why was that the case? Was it usage?
yeah.
Was it me just not evaluating that properly, right? Do I need to adjust my thresholds? What was it, right? So that cross-checking comes into play for guys like that too. But this
Hmm.
this group, like you said, it was absurd. And then going to the slowest time, even Keon Coleman, that 4.61. I didn't think he'd run quite that slow, but even there in the gauntlet drill, he was keeping 20 miles per hour across the field, running that on a
Yeah,
tightrope, man. Very good catcher, very natural across the field. So even with the slower guys, right, there's still the explosiveness to fall back on, the natural hands
yeah.
catching ability to fall back on, the instincts to keep your speed while gathering in stride. This wide receiver class is absurd. And I'm thinking, how many wide receivers do you think could go round one? And we'll pivot to tackle here really quickly here, but wide receivers, man, going round one, because I can think off the top of my head. Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas Jr., AD Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, maybe. Keon Coleman might
Yeah,
still have a
it's
chance.
it's tough.
Yeah,
Dane Brugler had a few weeks ago come out and said that AD Mitchell had like second, third round, maybe third round. He had said he had lower grades than where he had put him in his mock, which
yeah,
is I think was at the beginning of the second round
yeah,
to I think New England or Carolina is one of the two. Um, because he's not the most polished guy on film, and you can see that, right? He's definitely still kind of improving as a football player, but in terms of like that height, weight, speed profile, that's tough for me to sit there and say, look at all those teams at the end of round one that
yeah.
need a wide receiver and think they'll pass on him,
Mhm.
right? Like Troy Franklin, yeah, I could buy somebody passes on him, but guys like AD Mitchell just don't hit the league all that often,
Yeah.
and when they do, they typically go very high.
And the thing with him
Worthy,
too is he's a very good route runner as well, right? Like I think that's the big thing. It's not all of the football player
it's not
components.
all,
It's
yeah,
just,
it's not all just
I think the
size,
biggest
yeah,
question for him is that, he does occasionally let the ball into his frame at times. I think the biggest question is playing 70% on so many routes, right? Is that going to be
yeah,
sustainable at the NFL level? That effort. And I don't think it's an intrinsic effort issue within, right? Like I do think he gives good effort when the ball is coming his way, right, or when he needs to. But does he have the stamina to go over 70% at a higher clip, right? I think that's
yeah.
going to be the
Is
biggest
he
question.
going to be like like when you draft a guy in round one, he has to be that dude
Yeah.
pretty much right away as a rookie. Now, especially nowadays, it's with how many wide receivers hit every year,
Mhm.
you've got to be like different. And I definitely think that's a conversation to have with Mitchell. The other Texas guy, Worthy, is tough to see because it's like, yeah, 4.21, that doesn't happen ever,
Yeah.
but like it's very rare. But in terms of like draft projection, it's really difficult for us because we're not in the room with these conversations happening. But those guys don't have a super large hit rate. Um, and you kind of wonder just like how is that going to impact his draft stock in terms of like value. I mean, we see these guys every year, not necessarily the same, but these kind of like smaller fast wide receivers come in, they hit the league every year.
Mhm.
And I think Worthy coming in at 165, like
Yeah.
great. Emmanuel Forbes came in at 166 and still went round one. He did come in at 174 at his pro day, which we could talk about how if that was influenced at all by but Worthy. I think that's going to be interesting. We've never seen a guy go in round one, and like outside of the Tutu Atwell experiment. That kind of size profile has gone in round 3 or later, if it gets drafted at all, quite frankly. But Worthy will definitely be drafted. It's more a question, I think, for me of if you're an NFL evaluator, you have to sit here and say, okay, do you bet on the outlier? Mm-hmm. Right. That's the ultimate question. Is I think he's definitely an outlier. How much will that affect his stock? Because this wide receiver class is different. So do you go? Like if you're sitting there at the top of round 3, do you bank on Worthy or not round 3, excuse me, round 2 in the 30s? So do you bank on Worthy? Do you bank on Troy Franklin? Do you bank on Keon Coleman, who will probably be there, who we brought up just in terms of different profiles of guys? I think it's definitely a tricky conversation that we on the outside don't really know because we're not in the building.
Yeah, and I think the caveat comes if you draft a guy like that, an outlier, you have to have a plan for him, right? That's the biggest thing. Now, I do think that's where the composite evaluation comes in too, right? Like Xavier Worthy, first off, came in at 166 at the combine. Like you said, he'll probably be able to beef up to around 175, right? And I think he'll still be able to run that 4.2 speed, right? Like maybe a little bit lower 4.2, but the speed is still different, right? I think dropping that weight was probably just to go for the record, just try and do that, and he accomplished that. So I think you're still working with a really good speed threat. Right. I think the biggest thing is the route running. Does that counteract that? The hand, the tracking ability, right? There were focus drops at times, but he improved that in 2023, I thought. I think his ball tracking down the field is actually very good. So I think
it's better. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there are enough qualities to counteract that for sure.
He's definitely a round 1 caliber of player. That's not, I don't think that's the conversation. Yeah. Right. I think Xavier Worthy is a tremendous player. I think when you have to sit here and project, is he going to go in the first round? I think that's where the conversation, you could kind of go, well, is the NFL going to buy into it?
There's elevating and deflating, contrasting, clashing elements of his profile.
Yeah. Like that's the tricky part for us is like we sit here and say, well, I don't know if he goes in round 1. That's not us sitting here saying he's a bad player, right? Like I definitely don't think he's a bad player, like at all. I don't know if he necessarily goes in round 1 just because that's not the typical profile that teams have gone for. It's happened before. But after like things like John Ross, and granted they're not the same players, but like even if you're projecting Worthy to be similar to like a Marquise Goodwin, is that the kind of profile that the NFL will go for in round 1? That's where it gets tricky to me, is on the outside. And again, it only takes one team. Right, like if the Kansas City Chiefs sit there and go, you know what? Why not? Because he definitely won't be here by the next time we pick. So, but it's definitely a worthwhile conversation worth having, though. But he's awesome, Xavier Worthy. Congrats to him. What a historic moment.
Yeah. Bottom line, if you need a wide receiver, we've said it the entire offseason. If you need a wide receiver, this is the class to do it. But I think this combine really,
like the day 3, like Jalen Coker, guys like that. Like what the heck, man? It's just it's unreal. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head what the record is for most wide receivers taken. I feel like it's around 30, maybe 35. This group could definitely pass that. It's crazy.
Very good class. Very good class. Bottom line, if you need one, great class to have it. Another position that it is a great class to need one is offensive tackle. And again, much like the combine reinforced it for wide receivers, it reinforced it for tackles too. We had so many good testers. I think Joe Alt, Olufashanu tested very well as expected. Joe Alt, usually colleges mark up the heights. No, they listed him a full inch shorter than his. He was 6'9", and that just makes his tape even more absurd because he's one of the best leverage players in the class, in my opinion. But you have those guys. You have Amarius Mims, who tested very well and came in. He looks like a tight end, man. At 6'8", 340. There's no bad weight on that frame. I mean, the dude looks like a super.
That is chiseled. Yeah, like that's a Greek statue that came to life.
Your comp was Kratos, right?
Yeah, Kratos said it. Yeah, I mean, just he like you said, he looks like a tight end. Like you could put him and David Njoku's like body frames side by side, and I think they would be similar,
Yeah.
just in terms of Matt. Like you see a guy who's 340 pounds, you're like, oh, that's a big dude, and then you look at him and you go, oh my god,
Mhm.
that there's no bad weight, no over fat, nothing. Like that is I just saw pictures of him, and when I saw him get out there to run, I was like, there's no way.
Mhm.
There's no way he's 340. That was beyond absurd to me. I if he didn't think he was going in like the top 20 picks beforehand, he's going now. Like that's going to happen. That kind of athletic profile does not hit the NFL almost ever. Somebody's going to bank on that early.
Yeah, and that's what the NFL Combine is, right? Getting a firsthand look at these guys in person and seeing that, reinforces it for you a little bit. And he was far from the only one that, I think did use this opportunity to rise too. Troy Fatanu measured in at
Mm-hmm.
6'3", 3/4, 317 pounds, 34.5-inch arms. And I think he was one of the smoothest guys in positional drills
Oh
on
my
the field
gosh,
too. I
yeah,
mean, the
yeah.
lateral mobility, we knew it was a strength on tape, the lateral mobility, the recovery athleticism, but he just hammered that point home even more. I mean, his redirection
Mm-hmm.
quickness, efficiency of his footwork. I mean, if you need a guy who's going to be a day one tackle, there have been talks about maybe moving him inside the guard, and he does have existing experience at guard, but I don't think there's anything precluding him from staying at tackle, right? And I think this combine performance, he might go higher than we expect, maybe even top 16, right? So I think that was a good
Yeah,
a good rising opportunity for him. Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma used this very well as well. I have his RAS pulled up, but
yeah,
he had a 974 RAS. I think he measured in at what, 6'8". Yeah, he was another one who was listed at 6'7" in college, and he came in at 6'7", 3/4. So gained even more, 322 pounds, over 34-inch arms, 1.76 10-yard split, 34.5-inch vertical. Dude, this, and then you got JC Latham, who didn't test, but we know he's athletic vertically on the tape, right? I mean,
yeah,
this embarrassment of riches at the top of this tackle class.
yeah, yeah. I mean, what more do you even need to say? If you're sitting here, I was looking at this last night. There's a legitimate case to make that almost every team from pick 12 to pick 25, 26
Mhm.
could take a tackle. And you sit there and you're going, yep, nope, they could take him. Yep, he could go off the board there. Yep. You just go down the list of guys. And the good news is that if you pick in that range, you're going to have options to choose from. If
Mhm.
you're picking after that, good luck, because these guys all went ahead of them. Like the premium on offensive tackle this year, I think is going to come out. We're going to see. I think teams might actually lean a little bit away from taking like a corner, or even a couple of other positions, just to tap into this ridiculous offensive tackle class. Because I mean, what more do you need to say? Right? We didn't see J.C. Latham test, but he came in at the drills and looked great.
Mhm.
I mean, for a guy at 345 pounds, I
Yeah.
want to say he came in at 345, 346,
Yeah.
which is still a massive dude. Just huge frame. Even the guys on the broadcast were talking about how rocked up he looked at 346, and he comes in at the drills and looks great. Um, and then if you're sitting there in the top 10, Fashanu, Alt, I think unfortunately we did. I don't think we got to see all of Fashanu's
Yeah,
reps,
'cause he,
but
a right thigh injury, I think he suffered on his
yeah.
first 50, 40-yard dash.
But I mean, that he's an incredible athlete on film. Like that pops up. Alt, that's a tremendous athlete as well. At his size, guys don't typically move at that tall. Like it's
Yeah.
just you just don't have sequoia redwood trees that run
Yeah.
like Joe Alt. And then Fuaga, I think, is another one
Yes.
who had a great day. The amount of times that the broadcast kept saying the Jets are very interested in Fuaga without outright saying the Jets are going to take Fuaga at 10 was kind of interesting to see. That it was kind of like Woj trying not to leak the picks ahead of time by saying they're very interested in targeting this player. But there's so many guys that you just sit here and go, that guy's going round one. He's
Mhm.
going round one. Yeah, no doubt about it. Round one, round one, round one. Just on and on and on and on down the list. It was what a day. What
Mhm.
a freaking day for these offensive tackles.
Yeah, but I know you have an offensive line background, so it's probably like Christmas morning for you just watching all these guys just like, "Wow, wow. All right, there's another one. There's
Yeah.
another one off
Yeah.
the list."
Yeah. No, it was I was sitting here watching these guys. At one point my jaw was I had physically dropped my jaw. The noise I made when Brandon Thorne had said that Amarius Mims hit a 4.33
Yeah,
shuttle. Now, granted,
yeah,
that
that
time
was
did not happen,
yeah,
but
unfortunately.
the fact that I completely bought it, I think was also a testament to his athleticism. But the noise that I made, I what I said I can't say in a professional setting, but my jaw dropped. I was like, "What a? Are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah,
Like, what a dude!
mhm.
What a! Oh my
I know
gosh!"
that's the thing, the fact that we completely believed it. Like, all right,
Yeah.
to clarify for the listeners, because it's very likely that it spread around. There was a report that Amarius Mims ran a 4.33 short shuttle time, which would place him above 99.8% of offensive linemen ever to run the event. That was not the case. I think he tweaked his hamstring on the 40 and didn't
Yeah.
actually drill at all after that, but it was misreported.
Yeah.
So, to clarify, it didn't happen, but the fact that we bought it and were willing to buy it kind of shows like,
Yeah.
yeah, this dude's a freaky
Yeah.
athlete either way. I
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit more about Mims though, because
Yeah.
he ran a 5.07 40-yard dash. The dude is chiseled. We know he might have one of the highest ceilings in the class, and we know on tape there is more refinement than his experience level would suggest. He's very good at acquiring leverage, playing with knee bend. I think he has really clean pass sets for his age too, and the flashes of hand placement and timing with his anchors is very good. Naturally, there
Yeah.
are a few things with the hand usage that he can improve, but he's so young. There's a stable foundation there, and the tools are off the charts. The question I have with him, he only started 8 games, I think, in his college career, right?
Mhm.
He missed time with an ankle injury. And there were a few games last year where he wasn't able to play the full game because he got banged up and left with injuries. And then
Mhm.
on his 40-yard dash, the NFL Combine tweaks his
He gets
hamstring.
hurt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
is durability going to be an issue with this guy? Because
That's
we see that a lot.
that's one thing that I was gonna bring up when we were talking
Yeah,
about it. It's just like, and that's the tricky part with guys his size.
yeah,
And the durability is definitely one thing that we won't be able to guess because we don't have access
yeah.
to that. We just, we'll hear he came back clean and we're fine with it. And if that's the case, then good on him. I don't know. I don't think he popped any medical red flags at the combine. I don't necessarily
Usually we hear
know.
about it if it's a big one for
Yeah.
a first round guy. So
Um,
yeah, like I'm cautiously
but
optimistic there, but it is
yeah,
something to
but
be cognizant of.
it's definitely a good point to bring up with him because it's like how at some point availability is the biggest thing. But also keep in mind we haven't seen a lot of the top tackles play full seasons
Yeah.
since they moved to 17 games, right? I mean, Bakhtiari hasn't. Tyron Smith definitely hasn't. Lane Johnson hasn't. Like it happens more often than you'd like. So but it is tricky to gauge. Is he going to miss one game or is he going to miss 6 or 7? Which is something that we don't know on the outside. Uh, I just think the bottom line is I think somebody's going to bank on that talent,
Mhm.
regardless of the durability concerns. And we've seen guys with significantly worse, I think, go round one. So it is tricky to navigate though, especially. And I think it's a great point and one worth talking about. Is he's like, yeah, he's this phenomenal athlete, but he has only played a certain amount of games and he's missed a lot of time with injuries when he outside of those games. So it's definitely one on the outside that it's above our pay grade.
Mhm.
Right, we just sit here and talk about these guys, but it'll definitely come up in draft rooms, which is why I think the conversation is going to be about him. Probably not in the top 10. I don't know if that's necessarily something that will have like on like upside in talent wise. Yeah, like no doubt, no brainer. But I think with everything else in mind, that's not typically a top 10 profile.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, it's going to be interesting. I still feel that it's Alton Fashanu at OT1 and OT2. That's how it is for me, at least. And I think that, but I do think once you get past that group, I think there are arguments for each guy for OT3, right? Fuaga, Mims, Latham, Guyton, Fatanu, even. Like, I think all 5 of those guys at least have legitimate arguments to be the third tackle off the board, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Fatanu, right? You got the refinement, but the lateral agility and mobility as well. The natural leverage being 6'3", 3/4. Guyton. You got the former DT who has that hyper elite flexibility and the size, right? But also the explosiveness, the power, the competitive mentality that he showed at the Senior Bowl. Mims, we've talked about him at length. Latham, we talked about him too, just that road grader with that vertical explosiveness and the mauler mentality. And then, yeah, I mean, I think all of those guys have legitimate arguments. Then you go down to other guys who tested well at the tackle position. Kingsley Suamataya tested very well. Roger Rosengarten tested very well. You've got guys like Jordan Morgan who will probably move inside, but he tested well too. I mean, there's a lot of athleticism in this class, and not just in the top group, past them, right? And even developmental guys who tested at the combine, like Frank Crump from Wyoming, put up massive numbers at 6'8", over
Huge
300.
numbers. Yeah.
Tylen Grable from UCF put up very good numbers too. So I think this combine performance did two things for the tackle class. Obviously reinforced just how strong it is at the very top. Like, tackles and wide receivers are going to fly off the board, right? In the top 20, we might have half of those picks be wide receivers and tackles combined. It's absurd. And then also there is depth that goes overlooked sometimes, developmental talent that goes overlooked sometimes. So I think the combine did a great job unearthing that. We have around 15 minutes, really 14. So I don't want to round up, because then we're going to go over our deadline here. But let's get into other positions. AJ, I'll defer to you for this one, because there are many different developments to discuss. I think the running back group, there was a lot of good things to go over from that. I think quarterback Michael Penix Jr. passing his medicals was a big thing off the field that we can talk about. Definitely. Tight end Ben Sinnott testing really well, but other guys like Jared Wiley, Tip Ryman from Illinois, and then Theo Johnson as well, testing the way he did. Right, interior offensive line was good. Interior defensive line as well. Ruka Rororo from Clemson. Oh my God, I said that so well. Let's go.
You got it out. You didn't stumble once.
Oh my God. Look at that. Oh my God. I just need to take this moment. All right, we're good. We can't take any moments. We got to keep going. But edge rusher was very good too. I mean, Jared Verse tested very well. Chop Robinson, 4.48 40 as advertised. The dude's a freak. Linebacker, a lot of good players there. Corner, Quinyon Mitchell running that 4.33. And then safety, there were a lot of good performers there too. Cameron Kinchins was a bit surprising with how slow he ran, and James Williams too. But so we can talk about that. So we glossed over a little bit of everything. So now we don't have to feel pressured.
All of it.
Yeah, I was doing that. That's a preemptive move, so we don't feel pressured. But AJ, anything you want to defer to with the time we have left?
Yeah, I mean, we could let's just start and work our way through a little bit of these guys. I think quarterback. I think this week reinforced that we're going to see. I think it'll just be 4 in the first round, and I think JJ McCarthy, it sounds like it's definitely going to go in the top 10 picks. Like that's a no brainer. If the question is it going to be quarterbacks 1 to 4? Right? Is somebody going to make a move with the Cardinals? Is somebody going to make a move with the Chargers? The Giants are not hiding the fact that they're interested in a quarterback at all. Like that is not happening. They're sitting there saying, "No, we'll even move up for one. We'll send picks. Yeah, we want a quarterback." Like,
it's like, guys, you got a bad poker face.
Yeah, it's a little bit obvious here, but that is definitely, I think, going to happen. But I think also Penix and Rattler worked themselves into the round 2. Like I was like, I don't know, there might be round 3, a little bit of inconsistencies, but Penix's medicals coming in clean is huge for him. It coming out with them saying like there's no lingering issues, at least as far as we know. We just heard that they came back pretty clean. And then you look at the combine, I thought he was the best thrower of the day by far. And then you look, all I heard all week was Rattler's interviews had come back phenomenal. A lot of people said he had grown as a person from,
and that's the same thing we got at the Senior Bowl too.
Yeah. And so I think when you add on those two, I think that they definitely work themselves into round 2. I Nix is probably still going to go in the second. I think those 3 are your second rounders. It's tricky. Like Michael Pratt, I don't know if he really had a standout, Dave, but I don't think he was bad at all.
Yeah.
Keaton Slovis really surprised me. He's not Slovis, that's Fast Fist. Like that was his testing was a lot better.
That was good.
I'm proud of myself for that. That was quick. But like he came in just as a tester, I thought he did a lot better.
Yeah.
And as a passer, you just in turn, like when you saw him do these throws, there were a couple I think that got away from him. But overall, Slovis, I thought might have been the most pleasant surprise of the
And
combine,
to
just in
continue with
terms of like,
Slovis too, at the Shrine Bowl, he had some nice throws too. I really liked how he grew through the week.
yeah,
And then talking with Cam at the NFL Combine, he got to talk with Slovis on some schematic questions and said he answered those really well. So
yeah,
Slovis tested well, interviewed well. From everything I've heard, there's a
yeah,
chance that he's now in that day 3 developmental discussion.
yeah. Especially because like you don't really know who's that guy
Yeah.
afterwards, right? Like we're sitting here saying like maybe Sam Hartman is on the end of day three, maybe a couple of these other guys, but I definitely think Slovis worked himself into the being in the conversation to get drafted
Mhm.
at like, which is huge. Like all you need is just a shot in the league,
Yeah.
right? But and Sam Hartman, I thought stole the show of all the combine quarterbacks. Like I thought
With the hair.
his interviews were great. His testing was great. Yes, the
The
hair
hair
is
was great. Yeah.
tremendous. I'm so jealous. And apparently he doesn't use any product,
I know
which is
that's the
just
worst
insane.
part, man.
He just wakes up and it's like that. I'm like, I hate you. Like that's just that's just unfair. Like, but I thought the quarterbacks overall had a really good showing. Like, but like we can move on. I think
Yeah, real
go
quick,
dive a little bit.
let's do quarterbacks a bit longer because I wanted to touch on some of
Okay,
my observations from the
go
throwing
for it.
drills a
Yeah,
lot, and I think that generally in agreement with what you saw. I thought Penix was really spinning it. I mean, the velocity it just jumps out of his hand, right? I mean, Joe Milton stole the show with that deep ball, right, and the deep passing,
yeah,
but Michael Penix, if you want to talk about applicable drive velocity, that dude has it, and it was all over his Washington tape, hitting those tight windows, even 30 yards down the field, outside the numbers, right, fitting the ball where only his receiver can get to it. He has the kind of drive velocity to make that happen. And then he interviews well, clearly has the processing element, right? The football IQ. So honestly, man, the medicals were the biggest roadblock for him to be considered in round one. If he was going to be considered there, right? I think if he was going to go round one, it would probably be late. But I do think the medicals were the biggest roadblock for him. And looking at the other throwers, JJ McCarthy, he interviewed well. He interviewed very well. And you can see the velocity with him too, but especially throwing to his left, there was some inaccuracy there, overthrowing some guys, a little bit lofted, right? Bo Nix, I think his arm strength is solid, but I think when we saw him next to these guys like McCarthy and Milton and Penix and Rattler, even, it was a notch below that, right? And there
yeah,
were some throws on those inbreakers where he wasn't quite able to drive it to his guy in the torso without those passes stalling. So
yeah,
with Bo Nix, there's also a conversation to have. We know there's arm elasticity there. We know he's a really good athlete, really good creator, very accurate, but that arm strength might be a little bit
yeah.
lesser than what we've been accustomed to seeing.
It's definitely tricky with Knicks, especially because now we've seen him twice away from Oregon during this draft cycle. The Senior Bowl performance wasn't great. We
Yeah.
talked about that on the show. I
Mhm.
think like the first episode of the show was talking about that. Um, and then we go to the combine, and it was very obvious that he was a different caliber of passer than the rest of the guys. Like as a negative,
Yeah.
we said different or as a positive, but this was a negative. And like you can't help it when you're up against Penix and Rattler and Milton especially. But like it was kind of obvious that Nix wasn't the best spinner in terms of like RPMs on the football,
Mhm.
which is definitely a conversation to have. And now that we've seen him twice away from Oregon, I think it's tricky because it's not been the best. Like with
Yeah.
Knicks, the offseason needed to like firmly put himself into that round one conversation because I don't think the tape outright did that. And so I think it's a tricky conversation to navigate now with him because he's not had the best offseason.
Yeah. I think that's the perfect way to say it. Like the tape was, you had a lot of people saying he's kind of in that fringe, right? Like we're not 100% committed to him in that range. And I do think that, arm strength is kind of a tiered trait, right? Like it's a lot easier to drive velocity in the short range than it is the intermediate, and a lot easier to drive in the intermediate than the deep, right? The farther you go down the field, the harder it is to hit those windows while keeping pace on the ball. And the guys who have the special arm strength can do that. Drake May can do that. Caleb Williams can do that. Penix, Milton, those guys can do it. Even Rattler, right? Bo Nix can generate very good velocity in the short range, and there's some nice intermediate throws on tape too. But the NFL, if you're going to be a long time starter, it's if you don't have that arm strength, it's harder to counteract. You can't. It's not something that you can't succeed with. We've seen guys do it before, but you need to be a lot more the margin for error is a lot slimmer on the operational
It's a lot
side. And
slimmer.
I
Yeah.
don't think as good as I think Nick's is, I do think his pre-snap recognition goes overlooked at times. I think he's very good there. I think there are flashes on tape, but the layered anticipation over the middle of the field is a little too inconsistent for me right now. And then also the discipline with the footwork, right? Sometimes he'll try to arm it a little bit too much to compensate, and that'll create inaccuracy. There are questions with him, and I don't think the offseason
Yeah.
answered those for him. So he still could go round one, but I'm with you. I think day two might be a better value proposition for him.
I think all of these guys are like that. There's that range of Minnesota, Atlanta, Vegas,
Yeah.
and then like even like Pittsburgh and the Rams at like 41, 42, 43, like 51, 52, around there. That's where I start to see where I would think some of these quarterbacks come off the board. Um, and it obviously it depends on what happens in the offseason, like who goes round one, where does Justin Fields end up, et cetera, et cetera. But I think all three of those guys after the combine, I feel pretty confident saying they're going to go in the second round.
Yeah. Yep. And it's going to be fun to see how the board falls because free agency is coming up. That's going to answer a lot of questions for us in regards to needs. We got around 5 minutes left across the board. Position versatile. Let's bring our own positional versatility in here and let's go across the board. Just some guys across the board that surprised you or impressed you that you want to get out there, names to reference. The floor is yours. And then if we have time, I'll reference some of mine too.
Yeah. This a negative surprise, I think Bucky Irving.
Yeah.
Coming in at a 4.45 was concerning for a guy hit that small. He plays with a little bit more power than you'd think. So, like, I didn't think he would come in with a 4.3, but a 4.45 is a little bit tricky.
His explosiveness numbers were kind of rough too. I know the 10-yard split was very good though.
He did not have a great outing overall. I would say that was, especially with these like day 3 running backs, how that impacts his stock is definitely going to be one to see. But he's got good film, which is ultimately what matters. But it's tricky to navigate with a smaller back not testing overly well. The defensive tackle class, I thought, also had a great. Leonard Taylor, I think, came in slower than I thought he would, which is it's tough because he's not had the best year, right? Like I thought coming into this year, he was one of the best defensive tackles. He moved to nose for Miami, and that didn't really work out for him. Yeah. And then you come in at the combine was supposed to be his event to come in and like steal the show because he looks like a fantastic athlete on film, and overall didn't. But I think obviously Braden Fisk stole the show.
Yes,
at defensive tackle, like that was tremendous. Chris Jenkins, I thought also had a great combine performance up there. Mekhi Wingo, even Jaden Crumedy. Dwayne Carter. Yeah. Dwayne Carter's such a stud. Like I love his film.
Yeah, two guys real quick. Fisk and Carter, I think, are definitely going to go a lot higher than people expect because both guys are high motor. Carter was a 3-year captain at Duke, I think. I could see Fisk going top 50 and Carter top 75. I think it's definitely on the table.
Yeah, definitely. Linebacker group was pretty solid overall. I don't know if you like Peyton Wilson, we knew he was going to test well.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know if anybody was really surprised. Kalen DeLoach.
Yes,
I thought was the best overall linebacker there. Not on film, but like at the combine going through drills. I thought he was smooth. He looked great going through drills.
Yeah, as a hybrid,
and then he tested out the building.
Nickel linebacker safety. I could definitely see.
Yeah, that. It's a weird, like almost like position tweener, but because he's small for a linebacker, which is a cause for concern. But I think linebackers overall did really well. DB was good. The safety class you brought up was Kinchins which stunk for me.
Yeah,
that was a really bad day for Kinchins. But he's got good film, which is ultimately what matters. Taylor Demerson,
Cole Bishop, a couple of the
Cole Bishop.
Yeah, that one.
Cole Bishop, I thought was the biggest surprise. That was, I think, the most outlier in terms of profile difference in terms of what we saw on film. Versus combine speed, I did not think Bishop was that kind of athlete on the field. Like he was good. I did not think he would run like that, though.
Yeah, he's explosive, competitive, and that's the thing. That's what the combine is for: cross-checking, going
Mhm.
back, and so we'll have time to do that in the coming months. A couple guys on my end that I was impressed with. I'm trying to rack my brain here. I know Miles Harden from South Dakota was one that I was really impressed
Yeah.
with. I think in
Yeah.
positional
Good
drills,
player.
he was one of the most fluid guys out there, and he's almost 200 pounds. So I'm circling him
Yeah.
as a day 3 guy. And there were others that I know I'll think of after the pod and say, "Oh, I should have mentioned him." But unfortunately, that's just how it is. We are out of time today. So thank you all for listening. As always, we will be back next week for more NFL draft info. We will be consolidating this. We'll be, kind of learning more about this class. But until next time, thank you all for tuning in. Stick with us. We've got only a few more weeks to go. So we're on the home stretch, but it's going to be a fun
Yeah.
one. Thank you all. See you next time.